Before I start reading this, I just want to make clear that the views I express are not the views of the United States Marine Corps or of the Department of Defense.
Retired Marine Corps Major, current Pentagon Science Advisor, reluctant whistleblower Franz Geil.
This culture has been criminally negligent in a way that has led directly to the unnecessary loss of hundreds of American and innocent Iraqi lives and countless serious injuries.
Geil wrote those words in May 2007. Now Geil has written a new report based on internal military memos, emails, and briefings, which says hundreds of troops have been killed because the Marine procurement bureaucracy didn't respond to urgent requests for MRAPs, an armored troop carrier that is impervious to IEDs. This war has been plagued by charges of equipment shortages from day one. Iraq vet Patrick Campbell.
I had to call my senator to get body armor for my guys.
Machine gunner Bill Ferguson.
It took me 4 months to get a plate for the front of my helmet for my night vision to come down.
We all got issued lights, but then they only came with one battery. We couldn't get batteries for the rest of the tour.
Not enough tourniquets, which, according to the Baltimore Sun, resulted in deaths from bleeding in Iraq. No hemostatic bandages that chemically cauterize wounds in an instant.
I've never seen a hemostatic bandage, not once ever. We just had the old ones. Like, as a matter of fact, but this is going to sound, you use tampons, women's tampons, if you get shot or whatever, you stick it inside the hole, and they'll swell and like make it stop bleeding, supposedly.
And where do you get the tampons? You get them sent from your friends and family back home.
But it isn't just some veterans we happen to find.
A couple of years ago, I started collecting after-action reports from Marine and Army units.
Defense critic Winslow Wheeler.
The list goes on and on and on. First aid kits. They lacked about 120,000 tactical radios, a SINCARS radio.
Three-star General James Mattis insisted things have since changed dramatically.
I believe we're fielding the most well-equipped Marines in the history of the Marine Corps.
According to Franz Geil, the Marine bureaucracy has continued to under-equip our troops for years, and he's risking his career to make that charge public. He'd recently been on a 5-month fact-finding trip to Iraq, had prepared a detailed presentation, but
I was told by my superiors that I would not be allowed to give that presentation after all.
In his suppressed report, Geil made clear that the Marines had utterly ignored urgent equipment requests from the front for, among other items, an automatic language translator, an unmanned aerial drone, and most important, the MRAP, the mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle whose V-shaped hull disperses the impact of an IED or landmine from below, the leading cause of American deaths in Iraq. The first urgent request for MRAPs was sent in February 2005. Since then, at least 1,200 Americans have been killed by IEDs, and even the military agrees that MRAPs could have saved most of them.
Hello.
And the reason for the delay, says Geil, is the snail's pace of the military bureaucracy, apparent when he himself went to Iraq last year.
I realized that the people around me had a completely different sense of urgency than the people that I was dealing with back here.
Former Army medic Patrick Campbell served in Iraq in 2003, is now with IAVA, the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Campbell describes the situation early on.
I mean, we were putting metal on our Humvees that some guy got in trouble for bringing. We were welding it to the side of the Humvees, and everyone thought he was crazy for the 6 months before we got there, saying, you're crazy, you're not allowed to bring this, you're not allowed to bring this. And then when we got there, everyone's begging him for it because it was the only protection that they had from the IEDs that we were going to be driving past for 4 days. And a week later, Don Rumsfeld says, you fight with the army that you have, and okay, well, that means we're driving up with Mad Max armor, which is just plates welded on by a couple people who were too scared. They were just putting everything they could on these Humvees.
Stand by, fire in the hole.
No wonder the first MRAPs wowed the troops. Marine Reservist Todd Bowers, also with IAVA, served twice in Iraq.
I remember in 2004 seeing a MRAP pull into my camp. Once the drooling stopped and I actually got to look at the vehicle and see how safe it was incredible.
But troops were cynical about the odds of quick deployment for them.
Someone said, why don't we have one of these? And I just gave them the look like, you really think they're going to get rid of the Humvees?
meaning Humvees have the contracts, the connections, are the product of least resistance. Guile also says in his new report that the military was committed to building a next-generation vehicle that is to be introduced in 2012, and procurement officers saw the MRAP as getting in the way of that long-term project. That project, says Guile, was seen by the Marines as, quote, a higher priority than the daily killed and wounded, unquote. But there's another explanation, counters General Mattis. A current item like the Humvee was widely available. The MRAP was not.
We had a very low industrial base that could produce these. We're talking about 12, maybe 18 a month.
On the other hand, say Franz Guile and others, this is 40-year-old South African technology, in use for years there and in Israel, and if the military didn't want to buy from a foreign country, Force Protection, the U.S. company now making many of the vehicles, told us a large contract would have prompted them to partner with other firms, make lots more MRAPs quickly. Archie Massicati, who works for a rival company, says it took his firm only 2 months to get into production.
2 months from the time that we got the initial order till the time we actually had to deliver test vehicles to everything. So we can take these through a production environment almost in a semi-line effort and produce these at a high rate.
If DoD had come to you in 2003 and said we need something like this, would you have been able to have the same turnaround time?
Sure.
Consider another urgent need Guile tried to fill. Not a moderately big-ticket item like the MRAP, but a laser dazzler, which warns off oncoming drivers at checkpoints, prevents innocent people from entering a shoot-to-kill zone, but can damage retinas at close range.
The Dazzlers have saved more lives than any other piece of technology in Iraq.
Iraq veteran Patrick Campbell.
All of a sudden, a car is driving up to you. Shine them the green laser, and everyone knows what that means. It means turn the hell around.
Campbell was an Army medic. Todd Bowers, however, served with the Marines.
Did you have Dazzlers?
I never saw one.
In fact, Dazzlers hadn't been issued to the Marines in Iraq, who 2 years ago began urgently requesting the specific Dazzler I'm holding, a powerful 3-beam laser with a large spot size, available off the shelf from a company in Connecticut. 18 months after the first request was filed, the Marines finally filled it. With the device Mattis is holding, made by a firm in Washington state with a D.C. lobbyist, the Connecticut company had none. The lobbyist was former Republican Congressman George Nethercutt, who received campaign contributions from the firm, had been vice chairman of the House Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. Why not the stronger, cheaper Dazzler, available off the shelf?
This decision here was made because it did not pass laser safety certification. That's why we did not take this one.
Imagine the benefits from the perspective of national image, that we wouldn't have to shoot innocent Iraqis just to make sure that the occasional bad guy doesn't get through as well.
But the Marines, for all Franz Guile's urgency, not only wouldn't buy the 3-dot, but actually rerouted a shipment headed for Iraq and sent it instead to Marine headquarters in Quantico, Virginia. The Dazzler in my hand, it turns out, was from that shipment, still not in use in the field.
This shows, just by the fact that we have one email about this, doesn't happen often, and when it does, it right away gets corrected.
And indeed, the email certainly did emphasize the urgency of an immediate response to an urgent request. Quote, only the fact that you're engaged in this fight on our behalf keeps me from climbing on an airplane and hunting down these rear echelon fucks who would question the requirement out of theater, unquote.
This was an attempt to slow down one, and it was overrun within 24 hours.
Mattis should know. He's the general who wrote the memo, and he wrote it to complain about the failure to deliver the off-the-shelf Dazzler the troops were urgently requesting. But in fact, that's the Dazzler that was nixed. And for all the urgency of the email, both Dazzlers and MRAPs, for that matter, have been painfully, Franz Guile would say lethally, slow to make it into combat.